think this Sandoval trial balloon trolling, whatever you want to call it, it could actually be a master stroke if President Obama actually nominates Brian Sandoval. You have a very popular approval rating in the high 60s, Republican governor of a swing state who is pro-choice, supports the court's ruling on gay marriage. Republicans are going to find it hard to say no to one of their own.
That's Pete Seat, a former White House spokesman for President George W. Bush, on this program last night. And you heard him say that the possibility that President Obama might nominate Nevada Governor Brian Sandoval for the Supreme Court vacancy, and he calls it a master stroke. But earlier today, the governor released a statement saying, no, thank you. Governor Sandoval says he is, quote, beyond humbled for the consideration, but he told the White House, quote, I do not wish to be considered for the nomination. Joining us now from Newsmax New York, Newsmax contributor and columnist for National Review Online, John Fund. And John, it's good to have you back on Newsmax Prime, especially in the wake of the article that you wrote for the National Review saying that Sandoval is really a Trojan horse. Tell me about it.
Well, Brian Sandoval today may say he was not interested in the Supreme Court, but 48 hours ago he was hot to trot. He had already had dinner with President Obama. He had meetings with Senate Minority Leader Reid, the whole gang. Brian Sandoval is the most liberal of the 29 Republican governors. How liberal is he? Well, he not only passed the state's biggest tax increase, he vetoed all the tort reform bills that are out there. He also, believe it or not, managed to sign a bill saying minors should get parental consent or notification if they're going to have their child go to a tanning booth. But he blocked a bill in the Nevada legislature saying that minors should go tell their parents if they're going to have an abortion if they're under the age of 16.
John, I'm hearing from some conservative activists on the ground that Sandoval, when he was challenging a sitting Republican governor and my old House colleague, Jim Gibbons, that Brian Sandoval came out campaigning to the right of Ronald Reagan, and then once coming into office, just made this big swing leftward. Why does he enjoy high approval ratings there in the Silver State?
Well, if you have all the Democrats liking what you're doing and half the Republicans supporting you out of party loyalty, it's pretty easy to get big numbers like that, especially since the news media in Las Vegas has been hollowed out and frankly just reports press releases these days. So I think that Brian Sandoval fell into an ancient temptation in politics, which is if you play ball with the establishment is not going to throw you any curveballs, and they'll be very nice to you.
And the irony is, Chuck Muth, another conservative activist online yesterday, posited his own theory that this Sandoval reversal as governor was one of the reasons that Donald Trump picked up so much support in the Nevada caucuses, because Trump represents an anti-establishment outsider viewpoint. Do you think there's anything to that theory?
Well, I think people were very disillusioned and upset. Sandoval won a 70% majority running for re-election. He had a mandate, and the Republicans took both houses of the state legislature for the first time since 1929. So they were finally positioned to reform Nevada, which has high taxes on some areas, it has lots of regulation, and it has bad tort system in courts. So what did he do? Well, he vetoed a whole bunch of tort reform bills. He raised taxes despite having said he wouldn't. So with that kind of betrayal, that's perfect feeding ground for Donald Trump.
Well, let me ask you this. Moving away from the question of the presidential campaign, what does this tell us about the type of justice President Obama really wants to put on the court? Yes, Brian had an R next to his name, but as you pointed out, his recent stewardship of the governor's office ain't exactly doctrinaire conservative policy.
Oh, I think Barack Obama would like to get the most leftward candidate he possibly can on the bench. Because this is an election year and because Republicans control the Senate, I suspect he's going to have to trim his sails somewhat. But make no mistake, look at how doctrinaire his two previous appointees have been from the left, Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan. I don't think we should expect anything dramatically different from that even in this year.
And 2 minutes remain. And so I just want to get back to a question that has been bandied about. Early on, we heard Mitch McConnell say, nope, it's an election year. There's not going to be consideration. Lately, we've heard that both the Republican leader McConnell and the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, will sit down to talk with the president. Do you think that will come to fruition? And I guess more to the point, do you think the Republican leadership in the Senate will cave and move forward with hearings on a possible Obama nomination?
No, I don't think they will move forward for the following reason. The Republican base realizes that this November not only is the presidency at stake, but the direction of the Supreme Court. Were the Republicans to do that, I think that they would be guaranteeing a dramatic lowering of their base turnout. People would become very disillusioned with them, even more so than now. And that could take several senators with them and might cost the Republicans the Senate. I think they have to stick to their guns. As for meeting with the president always deserves a meeting. I think it's perfectly fine to have a meeting. I think if the president were to do a surprise and actually appoint someone who Republican senators could approve in bipartisan fashion, that would be wonderful. So meeting is fine. Agreeing with them, something else entirely.
All right, we can follow protocol, but then with the advice, no thank you can be said. John Fund, we say thank you to you tonight from Newsmax New York for your comments and insight on the Supreme Court and on Governor Brian Sandoval. You heard what John had to say. Your reaction to those comments, send them to me at newsmaxtv.com/comments. And when we come back, why there might be more at stake with this Supreme Court vacancy than originally thought. Larry Bell discusses the climate of the court and more as Newsmax Prime rolls on here on Newsmax.